Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 8th and tonight's movie is The Lost Footage of Leah Sullivan. Side note, this is the fourth movie I've watched for Horror Nights that's in the form of the blank of female first and last name. I didn't realize that was such a common template for horror movie titles. Anyway, this is a found footage movie about this, I think a journalism student, Leah Sullivan, who wants to, do a true crime expose about a cold murder case from, I think, 30 years ago in her hometown. Considering the fact that it's called The Lost Footage, and the fact that this is a horror movie, I'm gonna go out on a limb and guess that it didn't work out too well for her. I've seen quite a few found footage movies with the same basic premise. A young, ambitious journalist tries to uncover a case that really should have stayed cold. While not the most original, I have heard a lot of good things about this movie. In the trailer, it showed like a dozen different awards that this film got. I've yet to see a really good found footage movie this month, so let's hope that it starts out here. I'll be back after I'm done watching. Okay, this is not only the scariest, but also the best movie I've seen so far this month. I'm giving The Lost Footage of Leah Sullivan a 9 out of 10. It's right up there with Hell House LLC and Butterfly Kisses as one of the best found footage movies I've ever seen. It doesn't have the clever scares or intricate story of those two movies, but this one, the name of the game is execution. This is probably, out of all the found footage movies I've seen, the one where they did their very best to make it look like this isn't fake, you're just watching something that's actually happening. I'm pretty sure that this movie was shot without a script, sort of like how Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity were. They just knew how a scene was going, and they let the actors do their thing, because otherwise I don't know how they got it to be so natural. This movie is also very ambitious in the fact that, like Midsommar, there are very few cuts in this movie. The text crawl at the beginning of the movie, which is very vague, it just said, "I found this footage." It doesn't even say who it was. But they said at the beginning that this was completely unedited, and I do think that's what they were trying to go for, because scenes will go on for a very long time, it'll be one take, and things will just seem natural the entire time. There was never a moment that, took me out of the experience as, oh, I'm watching actors and this is a movie. I knew it was a movie, but the entire time it felt very real. Most of this movie is carried by Anna Stromberg, who played Leah Sullivan, and the director, Burt Grinstead, who played a cop named Patrick. In a way, this choice of having as few edits as possible is kind of a double-edged sword, because in one way it sort of contributes to the realism factor and sucking you in, because you feel like it's sort of like Wolf Creek, where you feel like you are right along there with them. There's no big time cuts, there's no changing of POV. But that's also can be a problem sometimes, because in order for it to be natural, there can't be something happening at every given moment. There have to be several periods where nothing is happening. And that means that this movie has more dead air than other found footage movies. But in sort of combination with that, this movie did another thing that I love so much in Hell House LLC, which is that it rewards the audience for paying close attention. This doesn't use the camera to make it a POV movie. This movie, multiple times, takes advantage of the fact that people looking at the footage can see things that the characters in the footage cannot. The first scare in the movie happens maybe 2 minutes in. One of the first scenes, it's Leah in front of the murder house and she's talking, and then in the back you can see somebody who is in front of the window the entire time move away, and you only notice it when they start moving, and they don't acknowledge it. And on that note, I would recommend you watch it alone, or if you're going to watch it with other people, make it so that they won't mind having to rewind and look at something again. And for me, personally, what it did was that it made watching this movie a very tense experience. I kept seeing the things that were in the back that the characters didn't notice. And as the movie kept going, I felt like my muscles tense up a little bit, my heart was racing kind of, because something horrible is going to happen at any second, but you can't really predict it. It's sort of like that thing about how the only types of jump scares that are really acceptable are the ones where there's a bomb under a table and there's a bomb under the table, but you don't know when the bomb is going to go off. This movie also employs several of what I like to call uh-oh moments, but you can call it something a little bit more explicit if you want. Moments where in pretty much 1 second the characters are immediately aware of how much trouble they're in. And what's really interesting about this movie is that when you get right down to it, the story is not that original at all. More than any other, it reminds me of Screamers, which was a found footage movie I saw for Horror Nights last year that wasn't good, but it was passable. But the name of the game here is execution. And the execution of this movie is very meticulous and calculated. If you like found footage, I would definitely recommend this movie. It's one of the best examples I've found. But if you're not into this kind of thing, you might find this movie a little bit boring because there isn't a lot happening. It's done very well, but it's not as clever as a film like, say, Hell House LLC or Butterfly Kisses. But if we're talking about found footage at like its very most bare bones, like no budget, a few people with a camera and they make something incredible, this is one of the best examples of that. I had high hopes for this movie and it did not disappoint. Now I want to go into some spoilers. I don't ever think I've seen a found footage movie take as much advantage of the fact that the characters aren't looking through the camera all the time. Because pretty much any time that they go to the murder house, there's something in the background that they're not looking through the camera so they don't see. And it's this weird, like, it kind of reminded me of the ghost from The Grudge. This, like, gaunt, tall, long black hair type of thing. And it'll be over a character's shoulder, or at one point, they were turning and they looked at a mirror and then went back and, like, then they went back to the mirror again and suddenly the figure was there. The best example of that from this movie was at a point where they leave the camera on a table in the basement and it's very dark. There's a lot of, I will say, there are quite a few way too dark shots in this movie, but there's a point where they leave the camera on a table and you can't really see anything, and then they go back to get it, and one of them has the flashlight, and then they shine it on Leah's face, and you can see the face of the figure appear right behind her. The two best uh-oh moments in this movie were, the first one was that from two separate people independently, they were told stories about this house, and in both of them they described a very particular sort of noise. It was like a bang and then a dragging noise and then another bang, and they both did it the exact same way. And they don't really, like, mention that, but Leah has a reaction when she hears it the second time. And there's a point where they're in the house and they hear that exact noise. But definitely a lot more effective was one where they were upstairs in the children's room. This is almost at the very end of the movie, and they were, and they discovered that noise I just talked about was coming from a dresser. And they can see that someone scratched names on the dresser, and some of them were, like, misspelled, but it was the name of every single person that died or went missing in the house. And then at the very bottom, it says Leah and Patrick. And that type of thing, while it's not the most original, when it's executed properly, it works every single time. And going back to extended periods of nothing being on the screen, basically, the last part of the movie is Patrick already got, and Leah is running out of the house and trying to run away, and she runs into the figure again, and I think she gets, like, cut or, like, hit or something because she falls to the ground, and I think she's still holding the camera because the only thing you can see in the entire shot, or maybe the brightness on my screen was too low, I was kind of like adjusting it because I wanted to be able to see everything, but pretty much all you can see in the shot is the flashlight. And then you think it's going to end, but it keeps going, and then eventually the body starts being dragged away and the camera's being dragged with it, and it's very eerie to watch. One of the best qualities of the lost footage of Leah Sullivan is its subtlety, but a lot like Hell House LLC, sometimes I think it's a little too subtle for its own good. Like, if you're not paying attention, you're gonna miss some of the best scares in the movie. But when you give this movie your full attention, it's amazing. This is a very immersive movie. It sucks you in and keeps you on edge until it ends. If you're a fan of found footage or just a fan of horror movies in general, I would recommend it. And with that is the end of the review. I'll see you guys tomorrow.